So, in this series on education for becoming, we're talking about an education that draws upon what's within a person and wants to bring it to fruition, to actualize potentials that are within. And we talked last time about two kinds of happiness to sort of explain what becoming means. On the one hand, you have terminal happiness, and that's happiness that has external sources. You need something to happen externally to you. Um, and then it also ends. So a vacation, a good meal, treats, whatever it might be, those are external. They create happiness, and then I'm content to a certain degree, but it ends. The other is normative happiness, and I'm going to spend more time on that today. Normative happiness assumes there's a potential within me, both for achievements and for thinking and for the kind of person that I am. And when these are brought to fruition, when they're actualized, I sense what's called normative happiness. And normative happiness creates a sense of satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment. Why? Because I'm becoming more of the human being I can become. Now, in the research on this, these are not my ideas. This is a synthesis of what I've learned both from history and also from the social sciences. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you to give you more context. So, way back more than 200 years ago, Ken Burns, he didn't live 200 years ago, he's reflecting on Ben Franklin. And what he noticed is for Ben Franklin, happiness meant lifelong learning in the marketplace of ideas. In other words, something happens, some new idea, and then you engage with that and you grow, you become something more. And he adds, in other words, self-improvement, lifelong becoming. And to Ben Franklin, and I think many of the founding fathers had a similar view because most of them followed the track of thinking that goes all the way back to Aristotle. But also contemporary scientists have found the same thing. Andrew Elliott and Carol Dweck, you may know the name Carol Dweck. She's the author of Mindsets, a very popular book. They're two prominent psychologists, and they put together a handbook of competency and motivation back in 2005, and then they edited it again in 2017. And what they use the word competency, that there is a drive in human beings, every human being, that wants to become competent at life, whatever their life is, whether they're a professional or a musician or an athlete or a plumber, there's some drive within them. I want to be good at the life that I have. Children are like this. Now, it may wane, and I'll explain why sometimes their enthusiasm for school wanes, but they want to read. They want to learn mathematics. They want to get good at writing. They want to get competent in the world. In this case, we gave them the world called school, and they want to be good in it. They want to be competent. And this sense of competence is what Dweck and Elliott found is it's ubiquitous. It's in all aspects of life. So whether children are trying to make friends at recess or playing well on the basketball team, or whether they're studying their mathematics and they're memorizing their multiplication tables, or they're learning how to factor quadratics, they want to get good at it. That's in them. They're driven that way. Then Elliott and Dweck also mentioned that this competence motivation is also a root of healthy emotions and a sense of well-being. And you can see why. If I am becoming competent in my life, I'm getting good at the way I live, and maybe I'm expanding it. I just feel good because I'm fulfilling what is my basic human nature, the drive that wants to become competent. They also mentioned that competence motivation is operative across lifespan. So even at my age, I've discovered I should retire, but that's not going to fulfill who I am. It's always, what now? What could I possibly be doing now? And you discover more and more about yourself, who you are, and then more and more about the world you live in, how you can contribute. Like in my case, I'm a grandfather 17 times over. I've got to consider, how do I be a grandfather to 17 different kids? I exercise this because it's a part of my life. is to be competent in this world that I have. You don't have this world, but I do. And it's lifelong. We want to be competent in the life that we have. And then finally, and this is really important, competence and motivation is also evident in all individuals across all cultures. No matter what culture you're from, no matter what religious faith you profess, no matter where you live, this drive for competency in the life I have, whether it's in a poor little village somewhere or whether it's in a wealthy mansion somewhere, there's a motivation to become. You know, at Birchwood School, we have a very, very diverse population. And sometimes new families, when they're interested in the school and they walk through and they'll say, wow, really diverse. I think we have 33 or 34 different nationalities represented and about 6 or 7 religions. And so parents ask, that's really great. You have multiculturalism, diversity. Wow, you must really work hard to get at that. And our answer is no. What we do is we help every single child to realize their competency in the world. So in our case, it's getting good at math, getting good at reading, getting good at writing, just becoming a great student. And so parents, no matter what background they're from, they said, yep, that's what we want. It goes across cultures, the competency motivation. Another important researcher in this field is William Damon, and he's the director of the Stanford Center of Adolescence, and he's a professor of education at Stanford University. And I read a lot of his books since the early 90s, and a couple of quotes I pulled out for this. One is he mentions that children are remarkably bright when it comes to figuring out who they are. In other words, their competency will drive them if they're going to play football. They'll say, I can play, but I'm not very good at it. They make these assessments all the time. And he goes on to say they have a searching understanding. I like that, a searching understanding of themselves, who they are. And very few adults appreciate that. You know, we usually think them as empty containers and we can just pour information into them. No, they're the ones who are sorting through where they're competent and where they can be competent. So they're very aware of what they can and cannot do, and they constantly probe their surroundings for feedback about their capabilities. So, you know, very often when children will solve some word problem in mathematics, you know, they'll say, you know, Mr. D, would you look at this? Would you look? They're always trying to validate, am I a good mathematician? And same thing when I taught writing. Would you read this, Mr. D? Would you read this to the class? They want that validation. Can you validate that I am competent in what I'm doing here? And so what education for becoming does is it draws children to realize their competency and to become competent. And I'll talk more about how you go about that in detail, whether you're a teacher or an educational administrator or whether you're a parent. But you can see what we're trying to do. You want to make them become a competent person in the world that they live in. Now, of course, it's very obvious. If we don't help them become competent, we're all the same. If we fail, if we don't understand, we withdraw. I don't want to participate in that because I can't do that. I see this in children all the time, and I have to find a place in math. If I see in their eyes, they're saying, I'm no good at math. My reaction is, I'm going to make you competent at some level. You may not be able to be like that boy or that girl, but eventually you're going to be competent, and the satisfaction that comes out of that and the motivation, then there's more motivation. Tell you one little anecdote. When I was 52 years old, my wife and I decided to take up tennis, of all things. I was kind of too old to get into anything else. And I thought, well, I can do this. I watched other people play it. I can do this. And fortunately, I had a great coach at our recreation center where we went to. And he was so smart, he let me play with all the older fat men. That was terrific. So I was a mediocre old fat guy playing tennis. But I gained a degree of competence. I learned how to hit a forehand, how to hit a backhand, how to serve. Was I any good? No, of course not. Not compared to people who play tennis with some regularity and have playing it a long time. But I gained competence, some degree of competence. And in doing so, there was a sense of, I did it. I fulfilled that. It was very minor, but you can see, and I think you can look at your own experience, the kinds of things, if you knew you could be competent, you tried it. If you were competent, you felt good about yourself. And of course, if you weren't, you withdrew. Well, children are the same way. All right, in subsequent videos, I'll talk to you more about how we actually implement making children competent in all areas of their life. Thank you.